why does it feel like the rich just keep getting richer while everybody else is just trying to keep up? It's this huge, complicated question. It shapes our politics, our society, our actual lives. So today, we're going to dive right into the middle of it, the Great Inequality Debate, to really break down the arguments that have defined this entire century. And really at the heart of this whole thing is one single question. Is the system itself kind of rigged? I mean, does capitalism, just by its very nature, create this ever-widening gap between the haves and the have-nots? To even start to find an answer, we've got to look at the one book that basically forced the entire world to have this conversation again. So, back in 2014, this French economist, Thomas Piketty, he publishes Capital in the 21st Century. And let me tell you, it was an absolute bombshell. He pulled together centuries of data to tell this incredible story about where wealth comes from, where it's headed, and why we should all be, well, pretty worried. What Piketty's data showed was basically three distinct periods in modern history. For over 200 years, inherited wealth just dominated everything. But then, between 1914 and 1950, you have two world wars and the Great Depression. These were massive shocks that just wiped out old fortunes and dramatically squashed inequality. But since 1950, we've been in what he calls a rebound, with wealth climbing right back up to those pre-war levels. And Piketty's point was, this isn't a fluke. This is the system just resetting to its natural state. And he had a really simple but powerful formula to explain why. Okay, what's so wild about this is its simplicity. This is Piketty's entire argument, boiled down to three little letters. R is the average rate of return on capital. Profits from stocks, real estate, investments, that sort of thing. And G is the rate of economic growth, basically how fast the whole economy and most people's paychecks are growing. Piketty showed that, historically, R is almost always bigger than G. So here's the kicker. If wealth from investments grows faster than the economy itself, then wealth is just going to concentrate in the hands of the people who already have it. The past, as he put it, will literally devour the future. Now, Piketty's prediction of this new Gilded Age, this world run by inherited wealth, it was hugely influential, but it also kicked off a pretty fierce backlash. Economists, especially from places like the Heritage Foundation, they dug into his model, and they came back arguing that his whole chain of logic is built on some really flawed assumptions. All right, so the first big hit is against his ideas about savings. In his model, the rich are kind of like robots who just automatically save a fixed chunk of their income, which makes their fortunes grow to infinity. But critics say, come on, that just defies common sense. They point out that even the old European aristocrats had to spend their capital when times got tough. A more realistic model, they argue, uses a constant gross savings rate. That takes into account things like depreciation and stops this endless, explosive growth of wealth from happening. Okay, this next part gets a little technical, but stick with me because it's absolutely crucial. Piketty's whole future depends on capital, think robots, AI, automation, being a fantastic substitute for human workers. There's a number for this. It's called the elasticity of substitution. Now look at this chart. The general consensus among economists puts this number way below 1. A big recent study puts it at 1.25. But Piketty's model, well, it needs a value of over 3. That number is such a massive outlier, critics basically say he picked the one number that would make his scary prediction come true. So, if we're going to sum up the technical case against Piketty, it goes like this. Critics say he confuses rising home prices with actual productive capital, that his model for how rich people save is just wrong, and that his assumption about robots replacing workers is a wild outlier. And look, these aren't just little nitpicks. These are direct attacks on the pillars of his argument, suggesting that this future of exploding inequality isn't baked into capitalism at all. But the critiques don't even stop there. You've got other thinkers, coming from more of a Marxist tradition, who argue that this whole debate is starting from the wrong place. Because Piketty doesn't even get the most basic term right. What is capital? See, for Piketty, capital is just a big pile of stuff, all the wealth that you can buy and sell on a market. It's an issue of distribution. But for someone like Karl Marx, capital isn't a thing at all. It's a social relationship. It's about the process of production, the power dynamic between the owners and the workers. From this point of view, Piketty is just measuring the symptoms, the distribution of stuff, without ever diagnosing the underlying disease, the power relations of production itself. So while all these economic debates are raging, this new, totally unprecedented form of capital has shot up, and it complicates, well, everything. It's a kind of power that some critics say makes these older models feel almost out of date. I'm talking about the incredible concentration of wealth and influence in big tech. In his book, The End of Reality, author Jonathan Taplin points to 4 key figures: Peter Thiel, Elon Musk, Mark Zuckerberg, and Mark Andreessen as the architects of a whole new kind of inequality. He argues their power isn't just about money, it's cultural, it's political. They are literally shaping the reality that we all live in. Taplin's critique is, well, it's sharp. He argues that while the real world is dealing with massive problems like climate change and economic inequality, these tech titans are busy selling us super expensive fantasies. The metaverse, crypto, trips to Mars, and living forever. He doesn't see these as just business ideas. He sees them as grand distractions designed to pull our attention away from the real, pressing issues right here on Earth. So, how on earth did these platforms get so powerful in the first place? Well, according to critics like Taplin, a massive piece of the puzzle is a short, kind of obscure bit of law from the 90s. It's called Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act, and it's surprisingly simple. It basically says that online platforms are not legally responsible for what their users post. Now, it was designed to help the early internet grow and flourish, but critics today argue it's had this profound and pretty troubling long-term effect. The argument goes like this. Section 230 isn't really about free speech anymore, it's about power. It lets a tiny handful of companies host and push content to billions of people, all while being shielded from the kinds of legal responsibilities that a newspaper or a TV station would have. And this, critics say, has allowed them to build a surveillance economy and manipulate public conversation with almost zero accountability, creating a brand new and very potent engine of inequality. Okay, so we've looked at the history, the economic arguments, the rise of tech power. Where does that leave us? Well, that brings us to the final piece of this puzzle, a potential solution that's actually getting a lot of traction from all over the political map, universal basic income, or UBI. The idea itself is pretty straightforward. UBI is a regular cash payment that goes to every single citizen with no strings attached. Those three pillars are the whole game. It's universal, so everybody gets it. It's basic, so it's a floor that no one can fall beneath. And it's income, just unrestricted cash that trusts people to know what they need for themselves. And this visual just perfectly lays out the huge difference between UBI and the system we have now. Right now, we have this tangled web of programs, food stamps, housing assistance, and so on. It's built on a philosophy of paternalism and distrust. It doesn't trust you with cash, so it gives you specific things. It's also targeted, which creates this welfare cliff where you can actually be punished for earning more money. UBI says, let's just build a solid floor instead. It's built on trust and autonomy. It gives unconditional cash to everyone, which gets rid of that work disincentive and massively simplifies the bureaucracy.
And if you want to see why this matters, just look at housing. Our current system is basically a lottery. Because there's just not enough funding, only about 1 out of every 4 families that's eligible for housing help actually gets it. The waiting list can be years, sometimes decades long. Our so-called safety net has giant holes in it. UBI's goal is to replace that lottery with a guaranteed foundation for every single person.
And that really leaves us with the ultimate question, doesn't it? In this age that's defined by Piketty's historical data on wealth and Taplin's warnings about this new tech power, what is the right way forward? Do we keep trying to build a more complex, targeted system of aid for the poor, or is it maybe time to think about a simple, universal foundation for everyone? That's the choice, and it's right at the heart of the Great Inequality Debate.